Hi, this is Michelle at Simply Scave Handmade, and I want to just give you a quick video to show you machine quilting in action. As you can see, I have my quilting gloves on that help me get a good grip of the material, and they keep the oils from my skin from getting onto the fabric. Underneath of my quilt, I have the Supreme slider set up. My feed dog or stitch length is on 0. I have a darning foot or a quilting foot on my machine. This particular machine has a needle down option right here, which means when I push this button, every time I stop quilting, the needle will stay down in the fabric and hold my place. This is the first machine I've ever had that does that. So if you do not have a needle down option on your machine and you decide to machine quilt, I recommend that every time you stop, go ahead and turn that wheel and put that needle down in the fabric to hold your place. When I quilt, I very rarely use a walking foot for quilting. Most often I use a walking foot for simply binding the quilt. A walking foot has teeth on it. Basically has walking feet that help grab the top of the fabric and work with the feed dogs on the bottom. I don't use that very often in quilting because I prefer the freedom of having this darning foot and moving the fabric myself. When I get started, I have marked my quilt. Now some people free motion, which simply means that they do not mark their quilt at all. They simply freely design. I'm not very comfortable machine quilting that way. It's a goal I would love to attain someday, but right now, while I'm still not as comfortable machine quilting as I am hand quilting, I mark my material. So this material has been marked in the fan patterns. And what I do is I take my hands and I lay them out like this, making a hoop with my fingers. And the only part of the quilt that I'm really concerned about is what's right here near the needle and inside my hoop. I want to take my hands and smooth the fabric out, making sure I don't feel any tension, any lumps, any folds. When I start quilting, I want to start a little bit slowly with machine and speed up as I feel comfortable and as I'm able to move the fabric. When I stop my foot, I stop moving the machine. And that is something that I've really had to practice, and that is making sure that I stop moving the fabric. At the same time, I stop feeding power to the machine. When I restart again, I start a little bit slow, and then as I start moving the fabric and get comfortable, I speed up just a little bit. Now, from what I understand, everybody machine quilts at a different speed and at a different pace. Personally, I'm a rather slow quilter, and that may be from the fact that I primarily hand quilt. So as you've noticed, I move fairly slow when I'm feeding my fabric into my machine, and that's just the speed I'm comfortable with. If you're more comfortable moving quickly, by all means do it. Okay, when I come to a spot where I need to hop over, and you can see this direction is quilted and this is quilted right here, but I need to be all the way over in this position to move back. What I'm going to do is travel. Now if I were hand quilting, I would take that needle underneath between the layers of the quilt and I would skip over and come out over here and start quilting. Well, I can't do that with a machine, and breaking thread is just a pain. So what I'm going to do is called traveling. And I'm just going to very carefully quilt right on top of the stitches that are already in place till I get to the point I need to start the new quilting direction. And as you can see, I just move my fabric. I personally prefer to quilt in a forward direction. Some people will move this fabric around, and you'll see on other videos or on other quilting instruction where they quilt sideways, they quilt going backwards. Personally, I feel like my machine quilts and runs better going in the forward direction. So for me personally, I prefer to always be going forward in the manner that the machine was really intended to go. As you practice, you'll get comfortable quilting in a manner that you are most comfortable with. The other thing I will say is I always pull my thread out and I tie a knot and tuck it in. You may remember on my hand quilting videos how we tied a knot in our thread and we hid it between the layers. I do the same thing with my machine quilted threads. When I stop and I'm finished with my area, I pull it out and cut the thread, leaving enough to tie a knot. I will put that thread on a needle and hide it between the folds. So I tuck all of my knots and threads into my quilt just like I do when I hand quilt. I hope this has been helpful for you. As you can see, I'm just working on a little practice fabric. I haven't started quilting the actual spring picnic quilt yet because I wanted to get my tension, my flow, and the feel of the design before I started using it on the actual quilt. As always, if you have any questions or comments or even some advice you'd like to share, please feel free to leave us a message. This is again Michelle with Simply Scaife Handmade.